Nisha is a research fellow and the head of Labour, Employment and Human Resource Development Research at IPS. She holds a BSc in Computer Science and Mathematics and a PhD from the Duke University in Lanka. She joined IPS in 1995 and has a number of publications to her name in the areas of education, health, labour, employment, social protection. She has also served in a number of national level committees in terms of labour, employment, human resource development, health sector reform. She is at present serving as a National Advisory Committee on Manpower Planning at the Ministry of Labour Relations and Manpower. Is that right? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Siddipala is a 50-year-old man. He sits outside near the General Hospital in Colombo. His main livelihood strategy is begging, and both his legs are amputated below the knee. He likes to eat at the Chinese restaurant, chicken fried rice. He can afford to do so because he earns about 2,000 to 3,000 rupees a day, which is on average about 40,000 rupees a month. So according to the poverty measures that Suranjana has explained, is he poor? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. These sort of questions have worried researchers for a long period. I mean, traditionally, poverty is measured using money-metric measures. But it's very easy to use. Once you identify a benchmark, like the poverty line, as explained earlier, you can separate out poor and not poor. And it's also, money is a good proxy for ability to purchase goods and services, which will improve your well-being. But there are limitations. Now, as you probably all of you know, people have been trying to define poverty. What is poverty? Traditionally, it's defined using money-metric measures, but more recently, since late 1970s, it has been defined using other measures. I mean, the most famous one is based on the capability approach by Amartya Sen, where he defines human development. Human development is the opposite of poverty. He says that human development is about what people want to do and aspire to become, and their capability to achieve these functions. And poverty is the opposite of that. It's the deprivation from doing the things people want to do and achieving functionings. So if you look at poverty in this framework, we can see that there are limitations in using money-metric measures to measure poverty. First of all, it's not comprehensive. It only looks at one dimension. And money is only a means towards getting the things that one wants, goods and services, one wants to achieve something, improve one's well-being. And it doesn't capture other important things like housing, life expectancy, education. It also ignores people's preferences because some people simply might want to live a simple life and not want to have fancy houses and so on and so forth. So, recognizing this, over time, people have come up with different measures of poverty which goes beyond the money-metric measure explained by Suranjana earlier. And two examples are the unmet basic needs approach. They look at three different dimensions: housing, health, education, and several indicators within those dimensions. And they say that if you're deprived of any of these indicators, you are poor. Another example is the Human Poverty Index, which uses the same framework as the Human Development Index. Only in the Human Poverty Index, one measures a person's deprivations, not human development. And it's measured along 4 dimensions. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about today is mostly the Multidimensional Poverty Index, which was introduced in HDR in 2010. It is also fashioned around the Human Development Index. It uses the same dimensions that the Human Development Index uses: health, education, and standard of living. And it has 10 indicators, 2 for health, 2 for education, and 6 for standard of living. And these indicators are brought together to calculate 2 measures of poverty: the head count index, which is similar to the poverty head count index, and the intensity of poverty index. That is the new thing about multidimensional poverty, is it only does not capture the head count index, but it talks also about the intensity of poverty. So multidimensional poverty index is a product between the head count index and the intensity of poverty measure. Now in detail, the indicators are these. Now there are 2 steps. Unlike in a unidimensional poverty measure, in a multidimensional poverty measure, you need to go through 2 steps, because for each person, you are looking at deprivations across many dimensions. So first you have to aggregate these dimensions for each person and decide whether that person is poor or not. And then you have to aggregate it across a society to come up with a poverty measure for the society. So if you go to the individual level, you ask questions such as these. In the health dimension, you can ask 1 or more, have any child in your family died? And if the answer is yes, you say that that family is deprived in that indicator. Or has at least one member in your family malnourished? The answer is yes. Again, that family is deprived in that measure of poverty. So on and so forth. You can go down the 10 indicators and ask these questions, and then see how people are deprived in different dimensions of poverty. Now, this information you can get from the Demographic and Health Survey. Because actually, when the UNDP came up with this, they were limited to a certain extent by the availability of information. So since DHS data is available for many countries, they based it on surveys similar to the DHS. But what is nice is you can actually add more dimensions to this. And depending on the country context, you can also change these indicators to look at different deprivations for people. Now, the next step is now in combining these indicators, there is a problem. How do you combine these indicators to decide whether a person is poor or not? Now take the example of Chandralata. Chandralata is a 45-year-old woman. She never went to school but learned to read and write in the village temple. She was a rubber tapper, but she now has a small home garden where she has grown tea. And she has fairly good income. Her husband is a woodcutter, and they have about 20 to 30,000 rupees. They earn 20 to 30,000 rupees a month. But she can't move away from her house because she doesn't have education. She can't find work outside. Now she has no education, but her children are educated. She lives in a mud hut, but she has good income and she's well nourished. Would you say she's poor? And that's a difficult question to answer. You have to come up with some, it's subjective actually. As a society, you have to decide, would you consider that person to be a poor person or not? Take another example, Lanka. Lanka lives in a small village near Lanka. She was well educated. She even sat for her O-levels, and she used to work as a machine operator where she met her husband. And they built a nice house initially, but then since having children, she was unable to work. Now her husband works as a helper in the Coca-Cola factory, where he earns about 600 rupees a day. And the two of them and their 2 children have to rely on that much of income. And one of her children died at childbirth. So again, they are both educated, they live in a good house, but their income is not adequate. And they're malnourished partly because they don't have enough income. And one child has died. Now, Ms. Inoka and her family are very poor. Now, you have to come to some decision before you can answer these questions. Are you going to say if they're deprived in any dimension, they are poor? If that is how you define poverty, then you would say both Inoka and Chandranaka are poor. But is it, if you are deprived in all dimensions, only you consider them to be poor? If that is the case, neither is poor. Or is it something in between? Now, HDR 2010, they use something in between. What they do is they weight the different indicators and then use these weights to aggregate so that you can come with one measure. What they do is they divide, there are 10 indicators, so they give equal weight to the 3 dimensions, health, education, and standards of living. And within each dimension, they give equal weight to the indicators that come within each dimension. So, for example, for child mortality, out of 10, you get 10 over 6, so a rate of 1.67, and so on and so forth. And here, the health and education indicators get more weight than the standards of living indicators because there are more of them. So you can't see here. I have done the deprivations for Chandranaka and Inoka. First column is for Chandranaka and the second one is for Inoka. As you can see, in the case of Chandranaka, she has no problems in terms of health and education, but standards of living, she's deprived in 4 dimensions. In the case of Inoka, her deprivations are in health and also in poor. So one measure of standard of living. So how they do it is for each indicator where there is a deprivation, you add it up and then you have a weighted sum of deprivations. And again now for Chandranaka it's 2.2 and for Inoka it's 3.8. And again you have to come up with a decision now. Is 2.2 poor or is 3.89 poor? And the measure that HDR 2010 uses is if you're deprived in 30% of weighted deprivations, you are considered to be poor. So, taking that definition, you would say Inoka is poor and now these numbers, of course you can play around with them. This is what they do, but they encourage you to change it also. So you could say it's the cutoff point is 4, it's 5. So depending on how you define it, how you call, how you define, identify Chandranaka and Inoka as poor, will change also. Now, this was the individual part, as I said earlier. There are 2 parts to this. First, you decide to identify whether a person is poor or not. After you identify whether a person is poor or not, you have to aggregate it for society. So, headcount index is very similar to the poverty headcount ratio, where you have the number of poor divided by the total population. And then it is multiplied by the intensity of poverty to come up with the dimensional poverty index. This is too much math, if you excuse me. Now this example is given, I borrowed it from the HDR 2010, which is for it's a small community of 4 households. Again, they have given the deprivations for each household. Here, in the top right-hand corner, they have counted the head count ratio. So for that, you also need the household size, which is given on the top row there. So you have the poor people living in the poor households. in the numerator and keep the total population in the denominator. Intensity of poverty is again the weighted count of deprivations times the number of people in the household in the numerator added across all just the poor households and divided by the total number of indicators by the number of poor people. So that's intensity of poverty. You can read more about it in the HDR 2010. I'm sure it's difficult to comprehend. So together, multiplication of these two gives you the multidimensional poverty. Now, as I said here, if poverty is deprivation in different dimensions, then these two be that this is these measures of poverty that they use for the NPI are also limited. So you can think of using other dimensions which are not being used currently, just because there is no information for that. So at the moment, CEPA was also involved in improving surveys so that they capture some of these other dimensions of poverty also, so that you can improve your measurement of poverty. Thank you.